Respect women.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Reverend JR, and today we're going to take a look at a TED Talk discussing toilets, bow ties, gender, and me.
I wonder what you first think when you see me.
Move the microphone to the side was my first thought. It helps to eliminate the pops from breathing on it.
Perhaps it's something about my curls.
Seriously, have the standards of TED Talks dropped so much that they don't even have a sound engineer anymore?
People often mention them. Or, what a dapper little man. In my experience, one of the first things people do is assume I'm a boy, or aren't sure whether I'm a girl or a boy.
Here's the thing though, the great majority of people don't care. They just want to make you a latte, or return your library books, or ring out your purchase at the store.
We do this to everyone. We assume what gender someone is based on how they look.
Yeah, that's generally correct, and you're actually going to come back to this point here in about a minute.
And if we can't tell, we get confused. I say we because I do it too. It's ingrained.
I don't know if confused is the right word, but yes, if I want to tell people about that person I saw, or I want to describe to the police how the culprit looked, and I tell the cop, that girl over there took my wallet, and the cop goes, why are you assuming the gender of that person? There may be an impediment to the process of communication. But I agree, it's more or less ingrained, the idea that we identify male and female, because there are evolutionary advantages to doing so. If you were unable to tell a male from a female, as many spiders are not, then you have a much lower chance of passing on your genes. This is even more true in a sexually dimorphic species, such as ourselves. But please, continue.
Our first decision, and mostly unconscious. But why?
You just answered the why. You said because it's ingrained, it's unconscious. That is the why. That's the how come. That's the because. That's literally the reason. There's no use for a rhetorical question here.
Well, I'm Audrey, and if we're talking biology, I'm female.
Well, there you have it. Case closed, show's over, time to go home.
But I feel that it's more complex than that.
So, biology is more complex than biology. Continue, I guess. Let's not go home.
For an entry point, let's look at my style.
So, nothing related to biology. You can use style as a justification for gender, apparently, which means that it's a choice you can make actively apart from your biology, and however you present yourself in a manner that you choose is how you expect others to identify you, even though you just told us that biologically you are female. You're really taking the piss out of your own argument. I told you it would come back in about a minute.
As you can probably see, I have a unique style.
Style is not gender nor sex, or so most SJWs, feminists, leftists, and really even a lot of moderates would tell me. You aren't female because of how you dress, but you may choose to dress in a certain way because you are female. You don't have to. Plenty of women wear t-shirts and jeans and other men's clothing. It's perfectly acceptable. It's less acceptable for a man to wear a dress for some reason.
But I wasn't born wearing suits, bow ties, and flamingo socks.
Quick, someone call Captain Obvious!
My style had to evolve, and it will keep evolving.
Almost like it's not related to the point you're trying to make.
And I think it gives some insight into my changing experience of gender.
So the fact that you choose to wear different clothes than you've done in the past, and the fact that you're going to continue to choose to wear different clothes than you are wearing now, informs your biological identity because the two are related, but one of them changes over time. In exactly the sort of way that they would change if they were completely unrelated.
Here's a photo of me before I started school, wearing a Star Wars top, a skirt, and sneakers, demonstrating to the world that I'm a girl.
Which, as you confirmed, you are.
It's the skirt, right? We all know that sign. So at this age, I was just a girl who didn't really care too much about what I wore. It was functional and varied. This all took a different turn when I hit the age of 5 and started school. I remember one of my first days at school, and I was in the girls' toilets when 2 girls I knew came near me and said, "Look, there's a boy in here." I looked over my shoulder, but there was no one there. So I asked them where. I realized they meant me. I was really shocked, as I'd only ever really been around people who knew and understood me.
So one time someone thought you were a boy. You didn't tell us what you were wearing or anything. We don't know if the girls had the context of your outfit to make that determination, oddly enough. Maybe you're going to tell us.
I felt upset and alienated.
But you didn't tell us if it was to do with your outfit or not.
Eventually, this misrecognition started happening in public bathrooms as well, with adults assuming my gender. Often I would get things like, "Why are you in here?" or "Wrong bathroom."
And again, you didn't clarify, is this when you were wearing the typically female or typically male clothes? One wonders. You seem to think it's important to your argument, but then you kind of left it out. Not only that, you're trying to tell us that the clothes you're wearing do in fact allow you to change your gender for some reason. So if it is that you were wearing boys' clothing, and people mistook you for a boy, from your own argument that is acceptable.
This eventually led to me being hesitant and tentative about even going to the bathroom in public. Mostly, people didn't actually say anything at all. They just stared at me.
It's awkward, but people are allowed to do that. Sometimes, in the men's room, another man will walk right up beside me when I'm at the urinal, and use the one directly beside me, even though the one a little further away is free. I don't presume that he's really interested in me just because he does it, but I agree, it is awkward.
This felt and feels worse. At school, this happened increasingly often, but while many people in that situation might have started dressing more typically female in dresses with long hair or bows, I became more and more masculine presenting.
So then become equally more masculine and just ignore how they look at you and tell them to fuck off if they don't like it.
Wearing what we consider to be boys' clothes, because in them I felt most authentically myself.
You know, I'm not sure it's just the clothing, though, because you've seen kids in school. For the most part, they'll wear t-shirts and jeans and shorts and so on. At least they do here in America. Maybe it's different in Australia. Maybe they have actual uniforms in most of their schools or something. But here, for the most part, the only difference between boys' and girls' clothing, until you get maybe to middle or high school, is just that women might have a proclivity to wear pink more often. But even that's not a hard and fast rule because a lot of guys will wear it too. So I mean, I'm curious, in a way, what kind of men's-specific clothing you might be wearing that would give the impression that you look very much like a man. Because presently, you just look pretty androgynous, if I'm being honest.
I was pretty adamant about just wearing male things.
Like jock straps and a goatee?
What that meant to me was no pink or even purple or any form of dress, skirt, or even glitter and frills.
And you're making the point for me. You're saying those are specifically girly things, specifically feminine kind of things, regardless of what anyone else around you might think. It seems to me like you're projecting onto society that they see it exactly the same way as you do. And I'm not sure that they do. Some people, sure. But everyone gets judged all the time. It's just how it is. And as long as people aren't treating you negatively for it, there's really not all that much to worry about. In exactly the same way as you judge things to be feminine because they're pink and frilly.
I didn't think of myself as a boy, but anything that was identified as female felt uncomfortable to me.
So in a way, you were just being a teenager. Your parents said, "Hey, why don't you want to wear some dresses or whatever?" And your school said the same thing, and you said, "No, I'm an angsty teenager. I'm gonna buck the rules." I mean, fair enough, you may not feel comfortable in them, but you also sound kind of like the typical rebellious teenager. We had plenty of girls in my school, too, who didn't like all the glitz and glamour and everything else, and wore the same clothes as guys. But no one really ever confused them for being a man?
I adopted the label of tomboy, which meant a girl that wore boys' clothes and played with boys' toys. To me, this avoided conflict. Tomboys are common, right? Even considered a stage, as though we'll grow out of it.
I mean, sure, in some cases it has a negative connotation, but ultimately it just says that you're different, you are atypical to those around you, and it's a way to identify you, and a way to accommodate the things you like and dislike. There doesn't have to be a negative connotation, and in most cases I think there isn't. But it's also very easy to go, someone's given me a label, I don't like it, I'm just going to push it away every time. I'm not going to wear the girly clothes, I don't like the name tomboy, I don't want this or that, I don't want to have any labels describe me. So I'm going to complain until we come up with a brand new label that describes only me, and so on and so on. You seem to have trouble sharing a label with any other group of people, and you seem to think it's bad that we can categorize people into groups, for some reason.
My parents never fought my insistence on avoiding dresses. They allowed me to choose what I wore because they believed it had no bearing on who I was.
Ooh, I'll bet that pissed you right off too, didn't it? Because now suddenly your authority figures have absolutely no problem with it, and so you can't rebel against it, and you have no specific label to combat, and you have to direct your angst at something else. I too was once a teenager. I know the struggle of angst.
I started wearing shirts and bow ties to any slightly formal event. Here's a photo of me at 6 wearing a bow tie made out of paper, because Dad was wearing his fabric one. As for my experience in bathrooms, I tried to avoid the problem by waiting until people left before I went in, because otherwise I'd feel trapped. Until about the age of 9, when someone mistook me for a boy, I would reply confidently that I'm a girl. But eventually, it stopped feeling right. Instead of gaining confidence the more it happened, I lost it.
That's the thing about self-esteem and self-confidence. They have to come from within.
Girl didn't feel right, but boy didn't feel correct either. So what did I want? I'm not sure I really knew at the time.
Fair play. A very liberal-leaning individual who says, I don't know. I'm not even upset. This isn't even sarcasm.
My friends started getting more and more into sports, but I was never sporty. I was a bookworm. If I were a boy, people would probably have said I was a sensitive one.
So what? When I was growing up, I was a boy and people did say those things about me. Not so much anymore, though.
They don't tend to use that term as much for girls, because it's what's expected.
I mean, if you're in a very conservative area, perhaps. But generally, no. Ever since I've been a child, everyone, male or female, all of my peers, have all been encouraged to go out and do what they want to do, whether that's study books, or play sports, or work on cars, or make clothes, whatever it is. Again, maybe it's different in Australia, or maybe it's different in highly conservative areas. But again, just because that's how people think it should be, and that's how they judge you, doesn't mean you have to worry about it.
So I started hanging out with a group of girls. This didn't really alter my style, more my attitude to the word tomboy, which I grew to dislike. I started to realize I could still be a girl and wear typically male things.
See? Problem solved. Stop worrying so much about what other people think, and just enjoy the things you enjoy.
In my mind, I was still a girl because I didn't feel like a boy.
I do believe the dilemma has solved itself now that we have worked through it.
At the age of 8, I travelled with my parents and the cast of our film 52 Tuesdays to the Berlin International Film Festival. 52 Tuesdays was partly about a mum transitioning from female to male. I imagine some of you are thinking, oh no, Audrey just got this gender confusion from her parents' filmmaking. But this gender questioning happened before they started considering it, and they say I've taught them as much about this as they've taught me.
That still doesn't change the fact that they could have indeed injected these ideas into your brain at a very young age, because clearly they had the concept before they made the movie. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, I'm just saying your logic is not solid.
Anyway, in Berlin, I met Bart. Bart wore drapey black materials, high-heeled boots, nail polish, and eyeliner. But he wasn't dressed as a woman. This demonstrated to me that I could be flamboyant and androgynous with my style, that my love of bow ties didn't need to exclude anything traditionally female.
There's very few androgynous individuals wearing them with corsets, though.
That year, when the film won the Crystal Bear Youth Jury Award, I took to the red carpet in eyeliner and nail polish. Here's a photo of me that night. Note the bow tie. I started to think of gender as something more dynamic. Gender was not your genitals, or even what you wore or acted like. And maybe it wasn't fixed.
Which leads us to another point. If it's not fixed, you can't get it wrong, because you effectively are male and female in that worldview. Maybe not at the same time, but that's unimportant because you are male and you are female at that point, if you're saying gender can be fluid between the two. Which means you can't complain about people calling you a man when sometimes you're a man.
I'm going to take a second to pose a question to you. Why does it matter to you whether I am a boy or a girl?
It doesn't. I'm not looking to make babies. However, the wide majority of people are, or are only attracted to one type of genital. And so for them, it is very important, especially if they don't want to be near a vagina for whatever reason. Again, our likes and dislikes do not have to be rational. And telling people, well, I don't feel like a woman, doesn't change the fact that you still have a vagina. And if someone has any inkling at all that they may want to mate you, but they don't want a vagina, then suddenly you've backed yourself into a corner neither one of you can get out of gracefully. There are practical upshots, but at the end of the day, you're right, I don't care. But a great many sexual people quite possibly do.
And if you think it doesn't, I'm going to really ask you to stop and think. Have you ever come across someone whose gender you just can't place? Have you wanted to know, even if you don't care either way, have you wanted to know what they are? For those of you who say, no, I'm totally comfortable not knowing. I don't use he or she when talking about them. I just treat them as a human without any gender identifiers. Well, that's impressive. It's hard to do.
It's not that hard, really. If I can't tell right away which gender you are, and it's not important to the task at hand, I honestly do not care. When I'm trying to describe you to someone, as I mentioned earlier, I may say he or she, and then correct myself if I'm wrong. But the point remains, I really don't care. This whole video has been basically one giant argument from personal incredulity. And with that, we're gonna close it off. If you enjoyed that, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't, leave a thumbs down. Leave some comments down below. Are you a boy or a girl? Professor Ash needs to know. If you want to know how to get your name on my screen right here, check out my links in my Patreon. And as always, this has been Reverend JR, signing off.